Welcome to the first video in our coverage of the new Amazon series Invincible. Invincible is actually an incredible comic that I've had the pleasure of speed reading recently, and while I had read the early arcs of the series a number of times, I'm glad I finally dedicated myself to reading the whole thing. The main series ran for over 140 issues with a couple dozen tie-in issues, which you don't really need to know, but I wanted you to appreciate how many comics I read this week. Normally I would start a series like this with the actual main character of the show, Mark Grayson, aka Invincible, and that video is absolutely coming next, but I wanted to start off on a different note and talk about a character in the show and in the comics that is the most interesting to me. Now, maybe it's because I've always liked villains more than heroes, or maybe it's because I'm actually training to take over the world myself, but since starting reading the series, I have gravitated towards Omni-Man, and he's become one of my favorite characters in comics ever. Today's video is on the comic origins and a brief history of the most powerful hero, then villain, then hero again, Nolan Grayson, the Omni-Man. Now, before we go any farther, keep in mind that this video is going to contain the majority of his significant actions within the comics, so that means that there is a good chance it's going to contain a ton of spoilers for the show. So as long as we are in complete agreement, let's continue. Omni-Man's first appearance was in, you guessed it, issue 1 of Invincible. Nolan Grayson is the husband to Deborah Grayson and father to Mark Grayson, who would go on to become Invincible. Omni-Man is widely recognized as Earth's most powerful superhero, and sometimes he's a member of the Guardians of the Globe, a team that closely resembles the Justice League. And I'm not going to discuss the history of those members ever, and you'll learn why in a few seconds. Nolan Grayson is first and foremost an alien, a member of the Viltromite race who came from the planet Viltrum. As Nolan's son Mark approaches his 18th birthday, Nolan plans to start training Mark, who's half Viltromite and half Earthling. Nolan has told Mark his entire life about the Viltromite people. They are a benevolent race of beings who evolved through a form of Darwinism, i.e. only the strong survive. After years of breeding the strongest of their people, they go out into the stars and begin to defend the universe for other fledgling planets. Nolan was stationed on Earth, where he met Mark's mother and became Earth's greatest champion. We also learn that Viltrumites live to be thousands of years old, and that their speed and strength is some of, if not the highest known in the universe. Additionally, they get more powerful as they age, so it's fairly rare for a young Viltrumite to be stronger than a fully matured or even an elderly one. When Nolan's son Mark turns 18, his powers kick in and he starts to fight crime under the name Invincible, a name that's truly put to the test many times throughout the series. One of the earliest adventures of the two is repelling a Flaxan invasion, where Nolan ends up stranded in another dimension for months. The Flaxans go on to be a major recurring species throughout the series, and I will discuss them in far greater detail when I cover Robot. So, for those of you who have already seen the first episode, you already know the biggest twist of the early part of the series. Nolan is not exactly who he says he is. One day, the entire Guardians of the Globe team is summoned to their main base, where they are systematically dismantled by Nolan. Nolan kills all of them, easily. He slaughters the entire team and leaves the planet to believe they were attacked by some unknown assailant. The remaining superheroes of Earth are obviously shocked to learn of their passing, including Mark, who looked up to the team and aspired to one day be a member of them. However, after one of the teammates of the Guardians of the Globe, Immortal, survives, Nolan decides that he has to tell Mark the gruesome truth, that it was he who killed the Guardians of the Globe. Nolan then explains to Mark the truth about the Viltrumite people and their empire, and that Nolan's true purpose on Earth was to conquer it. The Viltrumites were not as benevolent as they claimed to be. They were bred to be the strongest beings in the universe after thousands of years of infighting, selective breeding, and eugenics. The Viltrumites expanded over time and began to conquer worlds, but soon found out that they really only needed one Viltrumite per planet. They would go from planet to planet and offer a trade. A planet would allow themselves to be subjugated, and in exchange for that subjugation and a large chunk of their natural resources, the Viltrumites would protect them and provide them with their technology. If they refused, well, they'd be eradicated and the resources would be taken anyway. Nolan was stationed on Earth. He met Mark's mother, interbred with her, and assumed the guise of Nolan Grayson, author, husband, and superhero. However, now that Mark's powers had kicked in, he believed it was time for him to get back to his mission and the reason he was sent to Earth. Mark is obviously shocked to learn that his father is essentially asking him to take over the planet and rule them. Mark refuses and he and Nolan fight, and the battle is absolutely brutal and Mark is drastically overpowered by Nolan. Nolan beats him nearly to death but shockingly leaves Earth. He flies out into space, and Mark and the rest of the planet are left to wonder what will happen. Will Nolan return with more Viltrumites, or is that threat over? However, fortunately, Nolan does not return to the Viltrumite Empire. Instead, he goes to another planet, Thraxa, with insectoid beings on it, and he begins ruling that species. These beings have far shorter lifespans than Earthlings, nearing only 9 months at a time, and they typically elect the oldest person to be their leader. Nolan, being thousands of years old, is immediately elected leader, and he's known on their world as their greatest hero and a true man of benevolence. Nolan marries a woman here named Andressa and has a child, and eventually he sends for Mark, who's brought to him under false pretenses. However, Nolan and Mark somewhat reconcile. Nolan tells Mark that his time on Earth and this new world have changed him, and he does not want to be the conqueror that he was supposed to be. He asks Mark for help, as he's sure that the Viltrumites are on the way to his new planet, and Mark reluctantly agrees, but he's way too weak to fight pureblood Viltrumites. 3 of these beings appear on the planet and begin searching for Nolan. Nolan commands Mark to take his wife and son into underground caves that were used to protect the entire species from massive lightning storms that occur once a generation. Mark tries, but he ends up having to outrun a Viltrumite who is way faster and stronger than him. Nolan and Mark do battle with the Viltrumites on this planet, but Mark is easily dispatched as his powers have not yet begun to peak. But Nolan goes into full savage mode and brutally beats the crap out of the others. However, Nolan's spine is shattered by a strike from one of the Viltrumites he believed that he had disemboweled and killed. Nolan is taken captive and Mark is left to heal. In another shocking twist, one of the Viltrumites, Krieg, orders Mark, the new ambassador of the Viltrum Empire, to Earth and says he has 100 years to enslave the planet. Nolan is taken into custody to be executed for treason, but that would take some time, due to the fact that Viltrumites have this weird belief that the person being executed must be in perfect health before the execution can take place. Before the two are separated, Nolan also urges Mark read his books he wrote on Earth, as they offer clues for powerful weapons and allies that could help Mark take on the Viltrumites if they ever invade Earth properly. Mark remains on the planet Thraxus and helps rebuild, something that would have taken generations without his help. Andressa orders Mark to take the son of Nolan and her to Earth, which Mark complies with. Due to his mixed genetics, it's also stated that Mark's half-brother will age and learn at an incredibly fast rate, but will eventually slow down. Mark returns to Earth and brings his brother with him. He also asks his mother to raise the boy, and they pick the name Oliver for him. While in captivity, Nolan eventually meets Alan the Alien, pretty much the GOAT, and another character we meet periodically throughout the story. Alan will have his own video, but for the purposes of this one, all you really need to know is that Alan had fought Nolan and Mark in the past. Alan was a scout for the Coalition of Planets, charged with finding incredibly powerful beings who might help stand up to the Viltrumites. After a savage near-death encounter with other Viltrumites, Alan is rehabilitated and, much like a Saiyan, comes back way stronger than he was before. In fact, it's believed that he's even stronger than most Viltrumites at this point. Alan allows himself to become prisoner of the Viltrumites in order to find Nolan and understand what he knows about the species' weaknesses. The two communicate telepathically and over time become best friends. However, Nolan's spine had healed and the execution process begins where they attempt to beat Nolan to death. Alan easily escapes his confines and helps Nolan break out of the ship and flee to the homeworld of the Coalition of Planets, where Nolan begins plans to help them attack and take down the Viltrumites once and for all. Nolan also reveals another massive bombshell about the Viltrumite species. There are actually only 50 pureblood Viltrumites left. They were all wiped out by a virus called the Scourge virus, which was actually the reason that Nolan left in the first place, to go out and find a way to interbreed with other aliens and hopefully bring his species back from the brink of death. Anywho, Nolan helps the Coalition of Worlds prepare for what's known as the Viltromite War. Nolan helps track down incredibly powerful allies and weaponry that are capable of hurting Viltrumites. Then Nolan returns home to enlist the help of Mark and his son Oliver, who now resembles a teenager due to his rapid aging. Collectively, Nolan, Mark, Oliver, Alan, and many others head back out into space. It's also about this time that we're introduced to the leader of the Viltrum Empire, Freddie Mercury, who had left Earth to Oh wait, that's actually Grand Regent Thragg, the most powerful pureblood Viltromite alive. Nolan is able to retrieve Mark and Oliver and rally them to the war cause, but the group is ambushed in space by Conquest, one of the most powerful and oldest Viltromites, who was sent to hunt down and kill the group as penance for losing a battle to Mark on Earth, which I will cover in much greater detail in Mark's video. The team of Nolan, Mark, and Oliver fight 3 Viltromites and kill all of them, including Conquest. However, their ship is destroyed and Mark is gravely wounded, far too wounded to attempt to be moved. They stay on a remote planet for months until Mark gets his strength back, and Nolan and Oliver spend that time bonding and getting to know each other, as Oliver had not really spent a lot of time with his father since he was born. When Mark is all healed up, they rejoin the war effort, which had been going on for months, with the remaining Viltromites losing a number of planets due to the coordination of the Coalition and the collective might of their resources. After a failed attack on the Coalition homeworld by their leader Thragg, the remaining Viltromites flee to their home planet. A full-scale attack on planet Viltrum is launched. The forces arrive and do battle with the rest of the Viltromites led by Thragg. During this final battle, they are able to successfully destroy the Viltrum homeworld. This launches Thragg into a bloodlusted state, which is horrible news because he is by far the most powerful member of their species. Nolan and Mark are both badly beaten, and Nolan is disemboweled but left shockingly alive. Thragg and the others retreat, and the Coalition forces retrieve Mark and Nolan and nurse them back to health. Because of the fact that they just destroyed the Viltrum homeworld, Mark and Nolan believe that the remaining Viltrumites are probably on their way to Earth in order to destroy it. They rush back to the planet, expecting everything to be destroyed, but shockingly when they get there, everything's fine. But Thragg and the remaining Viltrumites are there, on Earth, in hiding, and they plan to interbreed with the human race to replenish their numbers. He presents Nolan and Mark with an option. Either let them live there, since they, destroyed their planet, and let them breed with the Earthlings, or they can continue to do their battle on Earth, and more than likely, everybody on the planet will die. Reluctantly, Mark agrees, and the Viltromite War ends in a truce. While on Earth, Nolan is able to reconcile with Deb, and the two travel to the homeworld of the Coalition of Planets, where they live for a period of time. It is not long after this, though, that Alan, now the leader of the Coalition of Worlds, informs Nolan that he has in his possession a new, stronger version of the Scourge virus, and plans to unleash it on the Viltrumites living on Earth out of fear that they would replenish their numbers. Nolan and Alan fight, as Nolan believes that if given enough time on Earth, the Viltrumites will become enlightened like he has, and killing them kills off his entire race. Oliver helps his dad fight Alan, but it quickly becomes evident that they don't have the firepower to take Alan down. The big fear here is that due to the genetic makeup of humans, if the Scourge virus is released on Earth, it will kill humans and Viltrumites alike. Alan is able to sway Oliver to his side, and together they defeat Nolan, who escapes and tells his wife of their plans before blacking out from his injuries. Alan and Oliver arrive on Earth and battle Mark, who tries to stop them from unleashing the virus. Thragg arrives and everyone gets real shook because he is a brick shithouse and basically everyone backs down except Oliver, who tries to unleash the virus on the planet and kill everybody, but the only person he actually ends up infecting is his brother Mark. Thankfully though, Mark doesn't die, he just loses his powers for a short period of time. During Mark's time spent in quarantine, the Viltrumites study his DNA, and Thragg learns that both Nolan and Mark are the long-lost descendants of their long-deceased supreme ruler, Lord Argyle. Nolan is placed in prison again, this time by the Coalition of Planets and Alan, but his charges are dropped after Alan and Oliver see the error in their ways. Despite the truce between the Viltrumites and the Coalition of Worlds, Thragg again attacks Nolan after learning the truth that Nolan is actually the descendant of their planet's long-dead leader. Thragg is desperate to keep control of the species and believes that Nolan is too weak to lead the Viltrumites back from the brink of extinction. However, Nolan is rescued by the rest of the Viltrumites, who overhear the news and swear fealty to him. Nolan becomes the leader of the remaining Viltrumites, and Thragg is imprisoned for a period of time, but released by Nolan to live in exiled, something that proves to be a horrible mistake. Now at this point in time, there's a really weird time travel arc that I'll cover in Mark's video, but because it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of Nolan's story, the important part here is that when Mark returns, 5 years had passed. So 5 years passed, a bunch of junk happens that we don't really know about. During that 5-year gap, Nolan has grown to become a very strong leader, and he's formed a partnership with Robot, who's basically overtaken the Earth and created a utopia through pretty horrific actions that force Mark and Eve to leave Earth. Additionally, Nolan's belief that the Viltromites would change also becomes true, as many of them fall in love and have children with Earthlings, no longer desiring conquest or the war that it brings. In secret, though, Thragg does the same thing that Nolan did. He travels to the planet Thraxa and forms an army of half-breed Viltromites. This leads to the eventual showdown where the combined might of the heroes of the Invincible universe and the remaining reformed pureblood Viltromites loyal to Nolan and the Coalition of Worlds face off against the might of Thragg and his army of thousands of half-breed Viltromites. In the final battle outside of the Sun of Earth, Nolan is impaled by a much more powerful Thragg. The blow doesn't kill Nolan, but it does damage his heart, which leads to his body being unable to repair itself. Thragg's children surrender when they realize that Thragg doesn't really care about them. He just wants revenge on Mark and Nolan for taking something that he thought was his. They decide to side with Invincible and Nolan, and the final battle takes place between Mark and Thragg on the surface of the sun. After an insanely violent battle, Mark is able to defeat Thragg, throwing his body into the sun. When Mark recuperates from battle, he speaks to his father one last time. Nolan, on his deathbed, declares Mark to be the leader of the Viltromites, and reminds Mark that he will be their greatest leader. After all, he changed everyone, even Nolan. Nolan dies of his injuries inflicted by Thragg, but the series doesn't end here, but it does for Nolan. I know that was a lot of info, but man, Nolan has the best arc of any character in my opinion. I'm really glad I read this comic series, and I think his redemption arc is one of the best in the history of comic books. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I know it was very long, but I hope you learned a lot about Nolan Grayson, the Omni-Man. And if you did, consider subscribing and dropping a like and a comment. This has been Nick with Key Issues, and remember the motto, Omni-Man over everything.